Hello, and welcome to the official podcast of CallUponTheLord.com. My name's Corey Wigington, and this week we'll be looking at Week 6 of the Great Story. We're covering the wandering people. The Israelites are still in the wilderness. They're still complaining about the things that are going on. They're still not trusting God. God brings judgment to them. There's some rebellions that happen, some battles that go down. A lot of things to cover this week. So better go ahead and get started. Of course, our study guides you'll be able to find on the Call Upon the Lord website. That's under the Bible study section, Corey Wigington and the Great Story. You'll be able to follow along with the study guides that we have here and hopefully contribute to your learning. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a graphic for you this week that I pulled from the MacArthur Study Bible. It is right here. This is the setup around the tabernacle. You remember last week we had talked about the things that were supposed to be inside the tabernacle, what they were supposed to be made of, how the where they were supposed to be positioned. We looked at a graphic that showed the layout of the tabernacle on the inside. Now this is the outside. The Lord gave specific orders on who was to camp where around the outside of the tabernacle. Now, accordingly, they were to camp facing the tabernacle. This kind of symbolizes God being in the center of everything. They were supposed to look at the tabernacle, look at the presence of God, and be able to see God was with them. God was actually inhabiting the tabernacle. We studied that he was in the tabernacle as either a pillar of fire or a pillar of cloud. That's how he led them throughout the course of the day when, of course, they were traveling. And then when they set up camp, when the cloud or the fire stopped, they would set up the tabernacle, and then God would be in the tabernacle. So here we see how they were supposed to camp around the tabernacle. In the north, we have the tribes of Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. In the east, we have Judah, Issachar, and Zebulun. In the south, we have Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. And in the west, we have Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. Of course, the question here is, where are the Levites? Well, the Levites are supposed to be surrounding the tabernacle. We talked last week about one of the jobs of the Levites was to guard the tabernacle, basically keep everybody who wasn't supposed to be in the tabernacle outside. If somebody, some stranger were to try to get in the tabernacle, they were under orders to kill them. So the Levites weren't really supposed to be in the north, south, east, or west. They were supposed to be in all directions around the tabernacle. Basically, their tribe was completely surrounding it. And the question, of course, is why? And to find the answer to that, we look in Numbers 3, verse 5. So let's go ahead and look at that. Numbers 3, verse 5. This is 5 through 13. It says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Bring the tribe of Levi near and set them before Aaron the priest, that they may serve him. They shall perform the duties for him and for the whole congregation before the tent of meeting, to do the service of the tabernacle. They shall also keep all the furnishings of the tent of the meeting, along with the duties of the sons of Israel, to do the service of the tabernacle. You shall thus give the Levites to Aaron and to his sons. They are wholly given to him from among the sons of Israel. So you shall appoint Aaron and his sons, that they may keep their priesthood, but that the layman who comes near shall be put to death." Again the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Now behold, I have taken the Israelites from among the sons of Israel, instead of every firstborn, the first issue of the womb among the sons of Israel. So the Levites shall be mine. For all the firstborn are mine. On the day that I struck down all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I sanctified to myself all the firstborn in Israel. From man to beast, they shall be mine. I am the Lord." So what we see here is the Lord basically said, I have taken the tribe of Levi as my own, or Levi. I've heard that pronounced both ways. Messianic Jew that I know pronounces it Levi, so I think I'll just go with Levi. So Lord said, the tribe of Levi is mine. instead of taking all the firstborn of Israel, I've taken the tribe of Levi as my own. So all the firstborn can stay where they are. The firstborn to me are now the tribe of Levi, and they will be my priesthood. So we also see some divisions in the tribe of Levi. Not all the tribe of Levi were priests. You know, the sons of Aaron were priests, but like the Korites, for instance, they were not allowed to be in the priesthood. They were supposed to take down the tabernacle after the sons of Aaron had packed up everything inside. They were supposed to take it down and to carry it. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. But only the sons of Aaron were supposed to be in the priesthood. So let's move on here to Numbers chapter 6. We'll talk about the Nazarite vow. Now this is different than a Nazarene. You know, Jesus was a Nazarene, not a Nazarite. Nazarite was a special thing in the Old Testament, and actually we see at least one instance in the New Testament, where people would set themselves aside for God. Nazarite actually means separation, dedication. What does it say? Dedication by separation. So they were basically serve God by separating themselves in some fashion. Now, there were 3 rules that a Nazarite really had to follow. The first rule was they weren't allowed to drink any strong drink, any alcoholic beverages. They couldn't even eat grapes. So they had to completely abstain from any of that behavior. They couldn't partake of grapes. So, you know, as far as drink goes, they couldn't even mix alcohol with their drink. You know, we've talked about that before, about using alcohol to kind of sterilize the water that they had. They couldn't do that. So absolutely no alcohol. Second thing was they could not cut their hair. Of course, we know one Nazarite that had real problems with that. That was Samson. When he cut his hair, major problems happened, right? The third thing that happened was they could not come in contact with a dead body. Now this was any dead body, whether it was their family or whether it was even an accidental contact. The Bible says even if somebody drops dead beside them and they accidentally come into contact with that, they have defiled themselves. And in case of such a defilement, they have to go to the priest, submit themselves. There's a sin offering and a guilt offering given, and the Nazarite basically gets reconsecrated any time put in toward their vow. I mean, if they vowed to be a Nazarite for a year, that time is not counted. See, because they have defiled themselves during the time when they were supposed to be separated, so it doesn't count. They have to start over. Other notable things was a man or a woman could be a Nazarite. Now this is interesting because in most cases in the Old Testament you see where women aren't really involved in a lot of the ceremonies. The men are required to attend. Women are it's optional for them to attend. But here we see where a woman can be a Nazarite. And that's really interesting because Nazarites are given a very high status. And Nazarites talks about the crown of their head being as holy as the high priest. Many of the things that are described about a Nazarite are also said about the high priest. So Nazarites are pretty far up there as far as how they are viewed in God's eyes. And man and woman can both be Nazarites here. We have only one instance in the Bible of where a woman was a Nazarite or had taken the Nazarite vow, and that is Samson's mother. Prior to him being born, she took a Nazarite vow. So notable. Now they say that might be Samuel's mother. I think I misspoke there. So, notable Nazarites in the Bible, we have Samson, Samuel, John the Baptist, and Paul. Paul, of course, well, let's talk about John the Baptist. John the Baptist was the last Old Testament prophet. He appeared in the New Testament, but he was still an Old Testament prophet. Paul, obviously, was one of the greatest apostles, and he took a Nazirite vow on his way back to Jerusalem because he wanted to show that he was still dedicated to the Torah. He still believed in the Old Testament, but he believed that the Old Testament spoke of the Messiah, and the Messiah was Christ. So he took a Nazirite vow to go back and show them that he was still diligent, he was still holding on to the faith, but Jesus was here, and he was the Messiah. So moving on from that, at the end of the Nazirite vow, what would happen is Nazirite would go into the priest. Priest would do a sin offering and a guilt offering. He would also shave his hair, and then the priest would take his hair, wave it before the altar, and then toss it into the fire, and then that would basically release him from his or her Nazirite vow. Enough about Nazirites. Let's talk about the children of Israel. So we pick up with them in Numbers chapter 11. You remember last week we were talking about I think right at the end, Moses was praying to God, saying, Lord, don't send us out from Mount Sinai unless you go with us. Because he knew if they left Mount Sinai without God, and God didn't go with them, they were traveling into a land that was inhabited by a lot of very strong and dangerous people. If God didn't go with them, they were going to get destroyed. So God agreed, I'll go with you. So they've set out from Mount Sinai now, and they're out on their journey. And you remember they are now eating manna every day. God is providing manna to them, which is the little wafers that taste like honey. They go out and gather it 6 days a week. Of course, they gather a double portion a day prior to the Sabbath because nothing happens on the Sabbath. So they set out on their journey, and well, it gets to the point to where they start complaining. It's like, we need meat. And I want to pick up here in Numbers chapter 11, verse 4. Let's read that here. Very interesting portion here. 11, verse 4. It says, the rabble who were among them had greedy desires, and also the sons of Israel wept and said, who will give us meat to eat? We remember the fish we used to eat free in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, the garlic. But now our appetite is gone. There is nothing at all to look at except this manna. So here they are complaining. You remember they were in Egypt, and they think, oh gosh, if I can only go back to that time, and we ate so well and everything was so great in Egypt, and wow, how short their memories were. I mean, they were slaves in Egypt. They were contemptible in Egypt. Egyptians wouldn't even eat with an Israelite. But yet they remember back to all this food and how wonderful it was, and it's like, was it really that wonderful? No, they've probably just been eating manna for so long, they're just tired of it. And they think back to everything else that they used to have, forgetting all the other bad stuff that went along with that. So now they're complaining. God has provided food for them, but now they're complaining that that food isn't good enough. And that angers God. So God says, okay, fine. You want food? You want meat? I'll give you meat. I'll give you enough meat to where you won't eat a day, where you won't eat 2 days or 3 days or a week or 2 weeks. You'll eat it for a month. You'll eat so much meat that it'll be coming out of your nostrils. That's quite impressive imagery there. So what happened? The Lord sent quail into the camp. Said they flew in about 3 feet off the ground. Were easily gathered by the Israelites. So they spent 2 days gathering all the quail. Of course, they didn't actually get to eat all of that quail, because as they started to eat the quail, God sent a plague on them, and many, many of them died. And that takes us back to Exodus chapter 15, verse 26. I'm going to look at that real quick. What does that say? That says, and he said, if you will give earnest heed to the voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all of his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have put on the Egyptian, for I am the Lord your God. I am your healer. For I am the Lord, am your healer. So, what does that say? It says, I'm not putting any of these diseases on you if you trust me, if you follow me. Well, what happened here? They didn't follow. They didn't trust. They're not listening to what Moses has to say. They're ignoring what God has done for them. It makes God angry. So God does what he says. He said, he told them, if you follow my commandments, I'll not put any diseases on you. Which also implies, if you don't follow in my commandments, I'm going to put these plagues on you. And that's what happens here. They didn't follow the commandments, and now God has put these plagues on them. So, moving on, we have more rebellion going on here in Numbers chapter 12. And this is from a very unlikely source. This is from Aaron. Aaron and his wife Miriam. They're upset with Moses. They think that, well, God has spoken through Aaron as much as he's spoken through Moses. Why shouldn't Aaron be the leader? They're also upset with him because evidently Moses says he married a Cushite woman. Now, some commentaries I've read says that this was basically Moses' wife after Zipporah died. Could have been, or it could have been Moses took a second wife. It doesn't really say. It's because it's not quite clear whether Moses had a second wife while while Zipporah was alive, or whether he just remarried after Zipporah died. But regardless, that was one of their points of contention. They didn't like this Cushite woman. So what does the Lord say? Aaron and Miriam come against Moses, start speaking badly about him, and the Lord spoke. It says, hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly and not in riddles. And behold, he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And that was in Numbers 12, verse 6 through 8. I mean, that's pretty scary stuff. I mean, they know God is talking directly to Moses. And the Lord knows that too. And he knows that they know that. So he says, you know I speak to Moses. And then Moses speaks to you. Why are you questioning Moses? That's questioning me. So, what does the Lord do? He immediately afflicts Miriam with leprosy. He says she immediately becomes snow white like a leper. Of course, Aaron turns around, looks at that, and immediately he's repentful. He says, repents to Moses, repents to God. It's like, I'm sorry, don't do this to her. And Moses turns and prays to God, Lord, don't afflict her. Don't do this. The Lord says, fine. Put her out of camp for 7 days. That was one of the laws. When you were a leper, you had to be clean for 7 days. You had to be separated. And then you could present yourself to the priest. The priest would say, okay, you're clean. You can come back into camp. So that's what happened. They put her out of camp for 7 days. She was healed of her leprosy. And then she gets to come back into camp. This is just another example of God has something in mind here. He's obviously doing it through Moses, and yet people are trying to rebel against God, and it makes God angry. See that a lot during this wandering period. We have more examples of it here. We're talking about the spies of Canaan. Of course, I used to love this song and story when I was in Bible school when I was little. 12 men went to spy on Canaan. 10 were bad and 2 were good. Who were the 2 good ones? 2 good ones were Joshua and Caleb. They were the ones that remained faithful to God. Basically, what happened was Moses sent spies out into the land of Canaan and said, go explore the land. See, what's there, what nations are there, what resources are there. All of them came back and said, wow, this is land full of milk and honey. There are so many good things there. But the tribes that live there are very powerful. They have very fortified cities. They are too much for us. If we try to attack them, they will defeat us. We cannot go in there. And what does this rabble do? I mean, they start stirring up all of Israel, and they're telling them, look, the land's there. We see it, and we see it's great, but we can't go in there. We'll be defeated. And the Israelites are very upset here because God told them to go in there to take over the land, and then they see that there's people in there that they can't. So now they stop trusting in God. Joshua and Caleb are up there and saying, look, the Lord has promised this to us. All we have to do is obey him, and he'll make a way. They understand this. Most of Israel did not. Of course, that upsets the Lord. And the Lord says, okay, fine. You're not trusting me. You've not trusted me from the time you left Egypt. So I tell you what. None of you will see the promised land. I will give it to your sons. The people that you say that you are trying to get it for. The people that you say are too weak to actually go out there and get it. When all of you are dead, I will give it to your children. And he proclaims, he says, for every day that the spies were in the land of Canaan, you will wander the wilderness for a year. So he basically proclaimed 40 years you're going to wander the wilderness before I let you into the land of promise. The only people that were spared this were Joshua and Caleb, because they were still faithful to God. They were still understanding that God promised it. God's going to follow through on it. So, and this next part, it's kind of, I see a lot of our society in this. God comes down on them, says, all right, I told you I was going to do this. You didn't believe me. Here's your punishment. This is something that your kids would do, I guess, would be a good example of, you tell them to do something, you punish them, and then they decide to do the thing that you originally told them. Well, that's what the Israelites did. They said, oh, well, God's punishing us. Well, if we just go ahead and attack them, that's what God wanted us to do originally, and we'll go ahead and do that. Moses tells them, he's like, look, God told us no. He told us we're wandering the desert now. He's not going to be with this battle. We're going to lose if we go in there and do that. Israelites don't listen. The Ark of the Covenant doesn't go with them. Moses don't go with them, and neither does God. And consequently, what happens? They run up there, attack the Amalekites and the Canaanites, and they are soundly defeated. So here they are. They didn't listen to God the first time, and he punished them. And then when they tried to do what God originally wanted to do, well, that's not what God told them to do. So they're disobeying again, and they go off and get a bunch of people killed. It happens a lot. We don't trust God. Bad things happen. Another example of a rebellion happens in number 16. I'm sensing a theme here. There's a lot of rebellion going on in Numbers. God tells them to do one thing, and people just think that they know better. This happens with Korah. Now, Korah is the son of Kohath, and that's where you get the Korathites. Now, they had a special duty assigned to them. We talked about that before. Let's go ahead and look at that. That's in Numbers 4:16. What's going on there? All right. Numbers 4:16. Let us look at that. It says the responsibility of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, the priest, is to oil the light in the fragrance incense and continual grain offering and anointing of oil. The responsibility of all the tabernacle and all of its furnishings, with the sanctuary and furnishings in it. And that is not the verse I wanted to read. Because I have 4:16 up there, not 4:15. Yes, there we are. When Aaron and his sons had finished covering the holy objects and all the furnishings of the sanctuary, when the camp is to set out after that, the sons of Kohath shall come to carry all of them, so that they will not touch the holy objects and die. These are the things in the tent of the meeting which the sons of Kohath are to carry. So the Kohathites were designated to carry the things in the tabernacle. Aaron and his sons, and Eleazar is one of Aaron's sons, they are to go into the sanctuary, or go into the tabernacle. They were to take down the veil to separate the holy place from the most holy place. They cover the Ark of the Covenant. They pack everything up. And then once everything's packed, then the Kohathites come in and they are to carry everything. So we see here that the Kohathites are not the priests. They are, they're still doing duties that the Levites were assigned to do, but they weren't actually the priests. They were just, they carried the tabernacle. They wanted to do more. They wanted to be part of the priesthood, and God told them they were not allowed. But Korah thinks he knows better. So Korah and 250 chiefs of the congregation come before Moses, and they come to him, and they're first off, they present that they're upset because here they are in the wilderness. They've been led out of Egypt. They're lost out here now, and Moses is the self-appointed prince over them. Of course, God had ordained him the leader, Moses the leader, but they kind of ignore this. They think that Moses just kind of self-appointed himself as the prince. So Moses, he goes before the Lord. I guess he commands Korah, Aaron, and all the 250 of the chiefs. He says, come back here tomorrow. I want you to fill your censers full of incense, burn it, and we'll let the Lord decide who is right and who is not. So Moses then goes before the Lord and he says, Lord, you know me. I am innocent. I've not done anything against these men. Don't accept their offering tomorrow. And what do we see happens? Moses calls Korah out of his tent. It says, Korah, Abiram, and Dathan came out. They stood at the front of their tents. The ground opens up and swallows them. Moses had told the people, he said, if they die just natural deaths, then then you don't have to trust me, and I'm not the prophet here. But if God does something different to them, then you'll know that God has chosen me. And what happens is the ground opens up, swallows them, and the people see, oh, yeah, Moses is in charge here. Further, what happens is fire consumes all 250 men who had their censers filled with incense. Just fire consumes them all. Why? Because we have a public sin here where they are coming out against Moses. So God does a public judgment. He kills everybody involved. Did the same thing with Miriam. Remember, Aaron and Miriam came to Moses, confronted him on his leadership, and God did something very public to her as well. So we see here this rebellion is put down by God. I guess when 250 men are consumed by fire, it kind of gets everybody else put back in line. Now we move on to Numbers chapter 20, and this is kind of the sad part here, is because Moses, after all that he's done, he's going to spend 40 years as the leader of Israel. He's going to lead them through the desert 40 years, but he sins. He doesn't trust God, and God tells him, you are never going to see the promised land. And here's what happens. Israelites are traveling through the wilderness. They come to the land of Meribah, and again they find themselves without water. So, just like before, the Israelites come to Moses and Aaron and start complaining. There's no food, there's no water. Why have you led us out into the wilderness? We were doing fine back in Egypt. This whole thing again. How quickly they forget. They've complained this way before. God set them straight. They've seen the error in their ways, and now they're back doing it again. It's just this constant cycle here. So Moses, once again, he prays, Lord, we need water. Give us water. And God says, yep, all right, this is what I want you to do. I want you to speak to the rock, and the rock will yield forth its water. Now, back in Exodus 17, 5 through 6, the last time he came upon a rock and they needed water, God said, well, I guess I'll just read this here. It says, God commanded Moses to strike the rock to get it to bring forth water. And that isn't exactly what that says. I think I just paraphrased it in my study guide. Let's look at that. Exodus 17, 5. Then the Lord said to Moses, pass before the people and take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand your staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock of Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out, that the people may drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. Of course, in that case, God commanded him to strike the rock. Moses struck the rock, and that's what happened. Water came out. This case, all God says is, speak to the rock. Well, what does Moses do? Moses doesn't speak to the rock. Instead, he turns around and he speaks to the children of Israel, and he says, you rebels, how dare you? God will provide. Well, I don't even think he mentions anything about God. He just, talks about, them always complaining and rebelling against God. And instead, he takes his staff and he beats the rock twice, and water spews out and comes forth. And then God turns on Moses and says, Moses, I told you to speak to the rock. I didn't tell you to hit the rock. Instead of holding me up as being the God of Israel, as being their provider, as putting my power on display, instead, you've reprimanded the people, and it looked like you were the one that are giving them water, when all the glory should be going to God. You have sinned. You didn't do what I told you to do, and because of that, you are not going to enter the promised land. So Moses was judged, and he was told, you're going to lead these people around the desert 40 years, and you're never going to enter the promised land. So, kind of a sad thing for Moses, but again, you have to follow what the Lord says. Aaron, of course, he has the same difficulties going on, because Aaron is there at that same time. He's also judged in the same way. A little bit later on, we see the Israelites come to Mount Hor, and the Lord commands Moses to take Aaron and his son Eleazar up to the top of the mountain. And once they get there, Moses takes the priestly garments off of Aaron, puts them onto Eleazar, and basically makes him the high priest. And then Aaron dies, because Aaron too was judged and told that he was not to enter the promised land because of the events that happened at Meribah. So Aaron died. Israel mourned for him for 30 days. And now Eleazar is the high priest of the children of Israel. Moving on to Numbers 21. I'm going to read this first verse here, or first couple here. Numbers 21, verses 4 through 6. It says, Then they set out from Mount Hor by the way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people became impatient because of the journey. The people spoke against God and Moses, Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water. We loathe this miserable food. Okay, now first off, it's not enough that they are complaining about no food and no water. God gives them water when they need water. God gives them food every day. It says the only food that they have is this miserable food. The manna from heaven that God gives them for free, that they don't even have to work for. But now they're complaining that it is this miserable food. Well, this angers God. And it says he sends fiery serpents into the camp, and they start biting people, and people are dying. And of course, Israel once again sees their mistake. They turn back to Moses. Moses, we're sorry. Help us out here. Moses prays to God. God doesn't remove the serpents, though. Instead, he gives the Israelites a way to not die. He provides healing for them, but the serpents are still in camp. What he tells them is, tells Moses, I want you to make a bronze serpent, fix it to a pole, and stick it in camp. And anyone who looks on that serpent, they won't die. And Moses does that, and of course, people are, when they get bitten, they just come. All they have to do is look on the statue. It's symbolic of trusting in God. You come, God told you, you look at that statue, you're going to be fine. Well, what they do, they go to the statue, they look, and God heals them. It shows that faith. It's trust. It's the whole thing that God's wanting to get out of them is this relationship where he tells them to do something, they trust him, and they do it. And that's what we have going on here. And then they pervert it. Let's look at 2 Kings 18:4. Now, mind you, this is happening, around 1600 BC? That's when all these events are taking place. 2 Kings 18:4. Let's go back just a little bit here. Let's go back to the first verse here. It says, Now it came about in the 3rd year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, became king. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. He did right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father David had done. He removed the high places and broke down the sacred pillars and cut down the Ashtaroth. He also broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made, for until those days the sons of Israel burned incense to it, and it was called Nehushtan. That's what we're going with there, Nehushtan. Now here's the deal. So they have this bronze statue. They didn't get rid of it once the serpents had left. No, instead they were burning incense to it, and they were worshiping it. And it had become an idol for them, something that God put out there so that they could trust in him. Now was more of an idol than anything. And we see here it took all the way 900 years before somebody decided, maybe we should tear that down and destroy it. It says he did right in the sight of the Lord, and he destroyed this bronze serpent because it had become an idol for the people of Israel. All right, moving on to Numbers chapter 22, we come across Balaam. Now this is one of the most famous stories from Numbers, Balaam and his donkey. So here's what happened. Israelites were, in the wilderness, but they were still fighting some people while they were in the wilderness. Balak, who was the son of the king of Moab, he saw this. He saw that Israelites had just defeated the Amorites, and that his nation wasn't strong enough to stand up against Israel. So what he wanted to do was find some way to curse Israel, to make them not so strong and not so aggressive. So what he did was, he sent servants to Balaam. Now Balaam was a pagan worshiper. I mean, he was not a godly man. It's more of a magus, some type of a magician or sorcerer, or false prophet. Several places in the Bible call him a false prophet. Joshua chapter 24, 9-10 actually talks about how Balaam was supposed to curse Israel, but God didn't let him. So Balak sent after Balaam because he wanted him to curse Israel. Evidently Balaam had the reputation that his curses they actually worked. So he sent this group over to Balaam, and God was actually speaking to Balaam and told him not to go. Now what we see here is when Balaam speaks to God, he recognizes God as the deity. He even calls him my God, or the Lord of my God. When God speaks to Balaam, though, he just says God. It's just God. There is no covenant relationship there. So we get from that Balaam was he was not an Israelite. He was not a godly man. He recognized God as a deity, but he wasn't a servant of God. So God told them when the first people came there, he's like, look, you're not going to go with these men. You're not going to curse Israel. If anything, you're going to bless them. So Balaam says, I can't go. God says, I can't go. Balak's not happy with that. He sends more men to Balaam, sends men of higher esteem to get Balaam to go along. Balaam prays about it, and God comes to him in a dream and says, all right, you can go with these men, but you have to do what I tell you to do and nothing else. So Balaam packs up and decides to go with the men. And the very next verse it says God is angry that Balaam went. And it's kind of weird because God just told him to go, but now God's angry that he went. So what we have to conclude from that is that the intention of Balaam was different, whether he was going after it not because God told him to, but because there was a lot of money involved, or whether he was going to still pronounce curses on Israel. We're not really sure, but God was upset with Balaam. So it says Balaam's going along on his donkey, and his donkey sees the angel of the Lord appear in front of him with a fiery sword, and he was blocking his way. So the donkey turns aside into a vineyard, or into a field. Balaam, upset, beats the donkey. Donkey starts going again on the right track. A little ways down the road, angel of the Lord appears in front of him and says it's in a narrow place between two vineyards. The donkey goes over to the side, kind of squeezes around the angel of the Lord, says it crushes Balaam's foot. I can imagine Balaam's not too happy about his donkey doing this. Again, he hits him with the staff. Says, what are you doing? Go a little bit more, and the angel of the Lord again appears, and it's in a place where the donkey can't go left or right, has to go straight, and donkey's not going anywhere, and just lays down underneath Balaam. And Balaam hits the donkey with his staff. And then it says the angel of the Lord puts words, or allows the donkey to speak. And the donkey says, why are you hitting me? I'm your donkey. I mean, do I ever act like this? And Balaam, interesting that Balaam is not confused at all by this. He just talks, says, if I had a sword, I would kill you for the way you're behaving here. And then the angel of the Lord opens Balaam's eyes, and he can see what the donkey sees. And the angel tells him, he says, look, your donkey just saved your life. If he'd gone forward, I would have killed him, or killed you, and let your donkey live. So don't be hitting your donkey. Of course, Balaam is very taken aback by this. Like, whoa, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. And God tells him, it's like, all right, you're going to go with these people, but you're going to do exactly what I tell you to do. So he ends up going with the people, and ends up declaring 3 oracles. The Bible lists them as 3 separate oracles for the people of Israel. Now, the first oracle says Israel cannot be cursed. Now, this is just kind of the general idea. It says Israel cannot be cursed because they are unlike any other nation. Balak's very confused by this because he was expecting Balaam to pronounce curses on Israel. And they even are sacrificing on altars of pagan gods as they go along here. But every time Balaam goes to pronounce what Balak thinks should be a curse, it's a blessing. Second oracle, he affirms God has intentions only to bless Israel. Israel's set apart, they are God's holy nation, and he will bless them, not curse them. And then the third oracle talks about the Messiah. So three times when Balaam was supposed to curse the children of Israel, he actually pronounces a blessing on them. Rightfully so, because God was right there and ready to make certain that Balaam did what he was supposed to do. And Balaam, he keeps telling Balak's like, look, I told you I can only do what God commanded me to do here. And I think he knew what the consequences was for disobedience. So the final thing we're going to cover here in this section is Numbers 27. And this is just really brief. This talks about Joshua. Moses knows that he's going to eventually have to give up leadership over the children of Israel, that he's going to have to name a successor. So he prays about it, and God says, okay, Joshua's going to be your successor. So what he does is, when they get to Mount Abraham, they go up to the top of the mountain, Moses, Joshua, and Eleazar, in the sight of all of Israel. And it says Moses lays his hand on the front of, he laid his hands on Joshua. So Moses put his hands on Joshua, and he did this in the presence of Eleazar with all of Israel watching. And he basically conferred leadership. Said, here's my successor, and this is who's going to lead you after I'm gone. This was so there was no question over who was the leader, over who God intended to be the leader. God didn't intend for there to be any type of a struggle of power when Moses died. And you see that a lot of times when kings die or whatever in history, where there's a war over, well, this faction thinks that they're most powerful, that they should lead, or this faction does, and that's not what happened here. God actually made it so everyone knew Joshua's the man in charge here. So when Moses is gone, we have to listen to Joshua. So what do we learn here from these stories? Well, I got 2 lessons down here. The first lesson is, always seek the Lord and do His will. Don't go off in a direction because you think you know better. No one has a better plan in mind for you than God does. We go back to Romans 8:28, where all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord. God has a good plan in mind for you. And sometimes bad things happen. But if you trust God, things work out. I've been told that that's not the best advice to give someone when they're in a bad situation. But every time I'm in a bad situation, I always think about that. It's like, I'll get through this. The Lord will get me through this. I don't know how it's going to happen. The Lord will lead me through this, and He's got something better waiting for me. So when we go off of track here and try to do our own thing and try to get away from God's will, bad things happen. We see that happening here with Israel. They try to do their own thing. They think they know better, or they start complaining because they were better off in Egypt. And God tells them, look, I brought you out of Egypt. I know what's best for you here. If you just listen to me, I'll take you down the right road. But you're rebelling here, so now I'm going to judge you. Now we don't see judgments like we do here, in our age of grace. We don't see the same judgments that we have in the Old Testament. But I'm certain that God doesn't appreciate it when we, kind of thumb our nose at Him and say, I know a better way, God. I'm just going to go and do it this way. The second thing here is, it's easy to fall away when you're not looking to God. I have down here that the Israelites did it when God was working great and obvious miracles in their day, and God was angry with the Israelites when they doubted. Now, you got to figure. They witnessed all the 10 plagues of Egypt. They saw the Red Sea part. They're getting manna from heaven every day. They're seeing plagues that God has sent on their people for disobeying. They see people consumed by fire, water coming out of rocks whenever they ask for it. They're seeing all of these miracles. But yet, short periods of time pass by, and they're like, I can do this better. I have a better idea here. I can kind of go off on my own way and do my own thing here, and When you stop keeping God as your central focus and start seeing all these other things, we got a lot of distractions in our world today. That's all that entertainment is distractions. And it keeps you from seeing what's really important. And I'm telling you, God is what's really important. Keep your eyes on Him. That's the main lesson I think that you should get from this, is whatever happens, you keep your eyes on God. Not everything else that's going along, all the other noise, it doesn't matter. God will get you through it. So that's what I have for this week. That ends week 6. We should be talking about Joshua and how they started entering the promised land next week. So I hope you join us then. For now, I think that's all that I have. I think I'm a little bit under my time today. I think this might be the shortest one I've done yet, at like 56 minutes or so. But anyway, enough of that. So hope you join us back here next week. Like I said, we'll be doing Joshua. So till then, read your Bible, do your studying, and God bless you in this coming week.